and welcome to another episode of the Marketing Meatball Mafia. I'm Christina Sarge.
And I'm Alison Micheletti. On our most recent episode, we met with David Harris, a forensic accountant. And today we're going to follow a very similar topic. And joining us is a dental CPA. So we're very excited to continue our venture into the financing and accounting world of dentistry.
We're happy to introduce Kate Willeford, CPA, owner of Willeford Group, a CPA firm that uses a very different, multidisciplinary approach to accounting and profitability consulting, focused specifically on creating a substantial impact on the quality of life and income of select entrepreneurial dentists.
So Kate is not only passionate about building quality of life success stories by teaching dentists how to keep more of what they make, but she's also busy serving as the vice president of the Academy of Dental CPAs, which is an organization that represents over 9,000 dentists nationwide, and being an active member of the Academy of Dental Management Consultants, the Speaking and Consulting Network, and is a contributor author for Dental Economics as well as other publications.
We really want to thank you for joining us today, Kate, and that is quite the resume that Alison just laid out there. We'd first like you to jump right in and learn a little bit about you and how you'd help dentists define their goals, ultimately improving their lives, and how you first got interested in the CPA world meshed into the dental world.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity. Our firm has been doing this for about 45 years now. So I've been doing this about 23 years, and my dad originally started our firm, and that was how we got into dentistry. So my dad had a college roommate who went to dental school and was looking for a CPA. And so as he started learning more about that, he started our firm. And we worked together for a very long time. And then I finished buying the practice from him about 7 years ago. So I'm excited that we're in this phase that we are now to be a second generation family business. And now I have 17 employees, and we've actually taken our company completely virtual. So we meet with all of our clients using GoToMeeting, video calls, also meeting in person at their offices. And, my employees are working in 5 different states. So, one of my goals in working with dentists is to really help them improve their quality of life and their income. And I really believe that's what their dental practice is for, is just a vehicle to help them achieve those goals. And I try to accomplish the same thing in my firm with my team members. So we started going virtual to be able to really improve the quality of life for our team members so that they weren't working really long hours during tax season in an office, not being able to be around their families and raise their families. So it's really been an exciting journey for all of us at the Willeford Group.
Yeah, so you don't only help dentists, kind of make their ideal lives come true. You guys live it and you practice it yourselves.
That's
sounds
right.
Like it. That's great. That sounds like a
We
really good
do.
culture for sure.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. And, there are so many great resources now like Slack where you can be talking to each other. So you feel like you're in the water cooler room, that we have in there. So you feel like you're still really a part of everybody. And of course, we do our video meetings as a group. So it looks a little bit like the Brady Bunch. We all get together on screen. So it's just an amazing group of team members I have. And, they're staff accountants, CPAs, and then also my administrative team. So they all just are top experts in dentistry, and they're part of the accounting that they do.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect. Can you maybe sum up or just quickly kind of summarize some of the key services that you provide dentists, and then we can, of course, kind of dive into those a little bit more specifically?
Sure. Well, the primary reason that dentists hire us is because of our unique dental expertise. We work with about 400 dentists, and I'd say probably at least 250 of those we're working with on a monthly basis, creating all their financial statements. So we review all of their accounting and QuickBooks, look at the coding. So they're hiring us for that reason, but also for our proactive tax projections. And that's really key because so many dentists have tax surprises when it comes to April 15th, but it doesn't have to be that way. So we're really good at making sure that they know in June, what we think they're going to owe in taxes for the following April. So our clients know for a very long time what we think they're going to owe in taxes. And then we revise that before the end of the year. And my goal with that is, number one, for them to know how much they might need to pay in taxes so they can plan out and budget for that cash flow need. But number two, it's to use all the tax strategies we can to get that number even lower by year end. So those are some of the core services that we provide. But in addition to that, we do all of the tax returns for them. We help with financial planning, designing, retirement plans for them. And then also we do a lot of transition work. So, usually I've got 3 or 4 transitions going at a time because in the transition world, as we'll probably talk about, the younger dentists really need their own independent representation so that they understand what it is they're buying, what it's going to cash flow and look like. And I work with a lot of young dentists because they're in my classes in dental school. So I teach at 4 of the dental schools in the country. And so when they're coming out of school, I really want to help build that entrepreneurial spirit and show them how they can afford to still own their own business, that they don't have to go into corporate dentistry like so many people are talking about right now.
Sure. So with those younger dentists in mind, and you're saying they're coming out of dental school, they maybe didn't have a lot of courses on how to run a business. I know that's like a common thing we hear is that there maybe was one business class and it shoved everything from accounting to HR and marketing is all shoved into one class. Do you do a lot of coaching and planning with the clients that you work with on how they need to budget their overhead for their practice? Or
we do. And I would tell you that budgeting is not a hot topic because a lot of people don't like that word and they don't like having to think about budgeting. So the way that I approach it is that we're really projecting out profit. And what we want to do is help them design the most efficient business that is going to have the highest value for them. We're hoping there's never going to be an emergency where they have to sell their practice, but I do run into those situations. And so I want to have my clients really see that they need to run the most profitable business compared to market in case they had to sell, but if they purposely want to sell in a number of years. And part of doing that is really planning out your profit and having certain goals that you're trying to meet. And then start to compare, well, how are you doing in actuality compared to those goals? I would tell you that honestly, probably less than 3% of dentists are doing any kind of budgeting and forecasting. They'll normally come up with a goal for production, and that becomes the BAM that they use with their teams. But that's about it. They very rarely plan out their expenses. And if they ever do that, they usually look at it just once after the year is over to then see how they did.
Yep.
What we do is we help design a very specific plan for them where we can actually go in there and enter in, exactly how many hours every team member is going to work. How much are they going to get paid per hour? We filter in then how that's going to affect expenses. And it helps us make decisions for the client. When can they afford to bring in an associate? And how would that affect their bottom line? I was just talking to a client this week who's trying to decide if she should hire a new hygienist or she should hire an assistant. And her practice is only 2 years old. So our projective planning on the profit is going to really help her make that decision because we'll be able to run the numbers both ways and then determine which one is going to make her more profitable in a shorter period of time.
All these services that you're mentioning here, I mean, even the tax stuff alone is, in my opinion, invaluable. The whole purpose of having a business is, to help people, of course, but you also have to be able to make a living. So knowing the ins and outs of taxes, knowing how to budget, knowing what to budget for where, knowing your overhead, and kind of living purposefully by setting those goals is, to me, just completely a no-brainer that you should be living intentionally and working with somebody like you to set those goals. And we're not just guessing like, oh, I spent $20,000 on this year. Like, okay, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. So,
and I like how Kate calls it profit planning, because she's right. A lot of our clients ourselves, when we bring up budget, like how much have you set aside in budget for a particular item? It's like we're met with crickets because they've not thought of that in that way. Likewise,
Mm-hmm.
we will run into clients, and I'm sure you have too, where they now have some an emergent situation that they haven't put into their profit plan or their
Yeah.
budget,
Right.
such as our phone systems need to be updated, or our computer system crashed and now we need to replace all the computers and all the ops and out front, and that's going to
Yeah.
be a huge endeavor. So when you're profit planning with your clients, are there percentages that you recommend that they plan for year to year for different categories?
Yeah, there really are. Because when you're projecting out the profit, part of one of the goals is exactly what you just said, paying down debt or being able to afford to be able to buy the phone system without having to go into more debt. So we really want to plan for some of those future expenses that may happen, but also to set very specific goals on when they want to be debt free, or when they want to be able to afford a full contribution to the 401k plan, or when they want to be able to add a 401k plan for the team. And there are specific percentages to meet. And this is where, it's just so helpful when they're working with a dental CPA, because as dental CPAs and our Academy of Dental CPAs, all of us know these percentages that everyone should meet, but they vary based on the type business model they have. So it varies depending on how many associates they have, if they only have one location, but there are specific goals that we want to meet, let's say for overhead. I was just talking to a client of mine last week who was trying to determine what she should be paying her team members right now. And she was trying to set some bonuses and a plan in place for this year. So we helped her design that, because what was interesting was the team was feeling like they needed large raises and they were doing great work for the practice. But when we looked at the overhead of the team, they were already over 32% overhead.
Wow.
And the way we look at overhead is their expenses compared to their collections, not compared to their production. And that's high. Right now, what we're normally seeing in a typical practice is between 22 and 24%. So it was a real disconnect. So we were having to then really think through, now, how do we help the team members be able to earn what they want to earn, but yet also be fair to the practice and create enough profit so the doctors can literally pay themselves.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, if doctors can't pay
So
themselves,
looking
not
at
doesn't
that
help
is
anybody.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of times when people look at overhead, this happens so frequently where my doctors are wanting to cut overhead. So they feel like the only way they can improve their net income or their cash flow is by cutting overhead. But I usually remind them that there are two ways to improve the bottom line. It's through increasing the collections, and that will make their expenses drop as a percentage, and then sometimes cutting some expenses as well. But for instance, on the team side, I like to look at hygiene profitability, because that really can affect this overhead percentage for the team members. As long as the hygienists are producing what they should be, which is at least 3 times what they're being paid, ideally 3.5 times if they're doing much perio maintenance, then that again helps these percentages start to fall into line when you look at the flat dollars that they're spending on some of their fixed costs and their variable costs.
Right.
Yeah. So and this is a kind of a recurring theme that we have experienced with a lot of the guests we've had on the podcast. Now, I'm assuming and if I'm wrong, please tell me. I'm assuming that you use the practice management software to pull those numbers, to look at hygiene production, and is that correct?
That's right.
Okay.
So we're able to use software to pull out the production figures. All the expense figures, we usually see those in QuickBooks. So that's the primary software most people are using. But to pull those numbers out, I really like to use a software called Dentametrics.
Okay.
I feel like pulling the numbers through that software is the most accurate way we're able to get the numbers. And it's a way for us to really be able to design those reports in such a way where the doctor can easily look at them. And we're really looking for profit leaks. And that's one of the great things about that software is in Dentametrics, I can look at where it appears that they may be leaving money on the table on the production side. Because I think it's important to really look at ways to grow the business both on the production or the top line side and on the expense or the bottom line side.
Certainly. So circling back to planning for certain expenses like marketing,
Yeah.
we often hear from clients that when they're looking to save money or they're looking to cut overhead, that marketing is usually the first thing thrown out.
Mm,
That they'll call us and say, I have to dial
yeah.
back my marketing, or I need to cut my budget, I need to cut my overhead, I need to reduce my marketing dollars. How do you
Mm.
advise your clients on what they should be preparing for in regards to marketing and how much of their budget they should be setting aside?
That's a great question because you're right. I think the tendency is for a doctor to think they've got to stop spending in order to create more cash. And that isn't always the case with marketing. As long as they're, doing the right marketing program, then I expect a good rate of return off of
Mm-hmm.
that. Typically when I see someone wanting to grow their business, they're spending at least 4% of their collections on marketing. There was a practices numbers that I looked at, I think it was about 2 days ago, where they were at less than one half of 1%
Wow.
that they were spending on marketing. And they're concerned because they might not be able to make payroll.
Oh, wow.
And my first response to that was, we need to be looking at marketing. You clearly don't have enough of the right new patients coming in. We need to make sure that you've got the right volume so that then you're able to cover all the other expenses. Typically I would say when someone's spending, 4%, let's say on marketing, I would expect to see growth of at least 8 to 10%. And that's not unusual. I mean, I have many practices that increased over 15% last year and the year before. So we're actually seeing some significant growth in dental practices when they are willing to make the right investment in marketing and other key advisors as well. The other thing I'm seeing right now with marketing is I feel like the front desk doesn't track the referrals very well.
Sure.
And so I find that frustrating when I'm pulling the numbers out of their software to try to determine if they're spending their marketing dollars in the right way, because we want to make sure that they're getting the right rate of return and the right patients. But usually what I find is the front desk doesn't record where the patient came from, or they're also letting the patient off the hook, where the patient will say, well, I heard about you in a few different ways. And they're not really recording all of those sources.
Right.
I was talking to one of my colleagues, Dana Johnson, who's the top Dentrix trainer in the country. And she was saying that in Dentrix, they can be selecting multiple answers for that question. So something as simple as that, I think, can be so important. So then we can make sure that they really are doing the right marketing to really get the rate of return they should.
Yeah. So I have a couple of thoughts there. You mentioned a little bit earlier, I think it was in reference to overhead, and it depends kind of. And then that's not really an answer that dentists want to hear often. But I think marketing is also similar. It depends, how much should I be spending on marketing? Well, what are your goals? What are we trying to do here? And also, where are you located? How competitive is the market? All of those things play a role, and there are a lot of variables to both setting a marketing budget as well as what you can expect your rate of return to be. There are, we could list them all off here, but that would take the entire podcast. But it's important, I think, for dentists to know that when they're going to invest in some sort of marketing is to make an educated decision and talk to either like a CPA or a trusted marketing advisor that can guide them on, here's what realistically you should be spending to get you to where you want to go. And then looking at rate of return, I see very similar things that you do, probably about 5-8% growth, but we do have those all-stars that see 15-20% growth. And those people are the ones that are really killing it. Like they're making sure they answer the phone. Their appointment conversion rate is high. It's good. They're presenting treatment plans. They're getting treatment plans accepted. Recall is great. All of those things play a role, not only in your marketing success, but also in what you do, helping them set their goals for their future and what they want.
Yeah. So, I find that there are a lot of practices that still aren't using social media well. And I think that that is a huge opportunity. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, as you guys know better than I do, to be able to use that. But I think it's a good way for the dentist's personality and their team's personality come across and their culture. And, most of us are going online to double check referrals that we've been given, even from friends.
Yep.
So when a friend will mention a new doctor to me, I'm certainly going to hop online and see what I can find out, see what other reviews there are, see if people are talking about them. So I think there are some important ways that that you really can increase the rate of return, bring in the right new patients, but it means really sending the right message out there and being consistent with it and having someone that can help in some of those ways, because the doctor certainly isn't going to have time to do all of those things and, isn't probably as passionate about that as he or she is about the clinical care they're trying to provide to their patients each day.
Right. Sure. Right. Well, I mean, one of the biggest kind of key or hot topic terms or phrases in the marketing world is authenticity. And you kind of just touched it on it right then and there, or right there.
Yeah.
Is there are a lot of dentists to pick from. You have to show what makes you different. Share kind of those personal things, the ins and outs, get a little vulnerable, show patients what it's really like and what you guys are really like. It can only help to differentiate you from people who are just, use social media as an example, just posting random stuff. Yeah, right there with you.
Well, and I find that the more that the doctor will invest in the right types of marketing, the higher the value of the practice when I help them try to sell a practice, but also too, the easier it is to attract the right associate. And that's really difficult right now. So it can be very hard to lure an associate away from corporate dentistry because oftentimes they're making very good money there, and understandably so. A lot of my students coming out of dental school are wanting to be able to make some good revenue at first to really get their loans paid down a little bit more, also get their volume up, feel like they can get faster at the dentistry that they're providing. But then I typically see that most of them are then ready to get back into or start getting into private practice. And so that's a difficult transition to make. And it's hard for them to find a practice that they feel has the volume there because, as the associate, they're now used to a high level of production with all these patients coming into corporate. And so they're wanting to replicate that. So, I do have clients who will start doing a new marketing program at least 6 months before we have the associate come in so that we have some patient need built up. And then we'll also build out sometimes 1 or 2 more operatories. We'll start looking for additional team members. So I think the marketing can really be integral in attracting the right associate and being able to show them that they're going to have a high enough level of production there to be able to make what they want to earn.
Absolutely. I saw this, just reminded me of something on one of the dental Facebook groups that I'm a part of. Is somebody was in that situation where they were looking at buying a practice, and the numbers, like they listed out all of the numbers, and they're getting X amount of new patients a month and they're collecting this amount, but total collections on the year were like, wait a minute, something's not shaking out correctly here. So I would, and I'm sure you're on the same page here, if anybody's considering becoming an associate or purchasing a practice, that's a transition as well. Have somebody who knows the numbers, look at the numbers and guide them into, is this the right decision? Something, or does something seem off? And thankfully on that Facebook post that I saw, most of the people were like, take a step back here. This doesn't make any sense. There's something missing, but it reminded me of that.
Well, and that can be the complicated thing about transitions is that, oftentimes the dentist is having to look at financials that they don't fully understand as they haven't been trained to. And so sometimes what we find is there's information hidden on the balance sheet, and the balance sheet is really what shows a significant portion of the flow of cash. In fact, I was just thinking about a brand new phone call I got, I think it was day before yesterday now, of a dentist who had bought a practice, and it turned out that there was fraud involved. And what had happened was the practice he bought had another location, they were funneling money from that location into the one that they sold, but it wasn't patient revenue. And you wouldn't have known that if you hadn't delved into the balance sheet and where some of this cash was coming from. So, brokers do an excellent job of helping dentists find practices to buy and of listing practices and marketing them for doctors. But I just really always want doctors to know that the broker is representing one side, and they should only be representing one side. And in the case of, let's say, a buyer who might be a young dentist, they oftentimes don't really realize that that broker isn't necessarily looking out for their best interest, because usually they're representing the person selling. And, that's how they're getting their commission. And again, the brokers do an excellent job of the work that they're doing. But that's why the buyer really needs to have independent representation. So I always recommend an independent CPA. I do think a dental CPA is going to be able to identify the key aspects of what they should know about the practice, and then also their own attorney. And you'd be surprised how many times a doctor doesn't realize they need their own attorney. They thought they could just use the same attorney as the person who's selling, but they need to just really be fully protected, fully understand what it is they're buying, just to make sure that that's going to be the right practice.
So, Kate, personally and professionally, I completely am on board with this kind of mindset of hiring somebody to look at these specifics that you might not be super familiar with as a new dentist or even a seasoned dentist. It's well worth the investment up front to protect yourself down the line.
Right. Like even when we talk,
it is, because once you get behind the 8 ball, it's really hard to get out from underneath that. So, there are practices that have to close because you can't cover the note payments, particularly if fraud was involved. And also, there are a lot of people who get behind on their taxes. And once you're behind a year or two, it's very difficult to pay that old tax bill and then still the current one. It's not unusual for me to talk to dentists who are over $150,000 behind on their taxes.
Wow.
So they can't pay the old taxes, and then the current ones are growing even more, and it's extremely stressful. So you're wanting to avoid all of that by planning ahead. And the other thing I would say too is almost any practice has some value to it. The determination is whether or not you're buying it at the right price and whether it's the right practice for you. So some of the dentists that I talk to will fall in love with a practice, let's say that's in Atlanta, but they realize they really want to live at the beach, so it could be an amazing opportunity. This practice in Atlanta could be a great deal, but if that's not really where you want to live, possibly raise your kids, then that's just not the right practice for you. And that comes back to those quality of life goals, because I've had clients over the years who have bought a practice and then realized a few years later they're just not happy. So they want to move to another part of the country, and it's really expensive to do that and difficult to do. So as much as possible, I like to plan ahead and help them think about not only the income goals, but also the quality of life goals, and make sure that that practice is really going to give them everything that they want, and that we can really make sure it's going to be as profitable for them as possible.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
There's been a lot of discussion lately about, the fear of the DSOs and the taking over the private practices. And there have been a lot of talks about go rural. Rural need private dentists. You're going to succeed. And that's good and fine. But to your point, if you are a city person, you are not going to be happy in a rural area, even if you might make a killing and you might bring in all the money in the world. But if you're an hour from, the closest mall and then that's your thing.
That's right.
You really need to think about those things.
So the quality of life won't be there, so they won't be happy. But then likewise, we've run into situations where we'll have somebody approach us and say, thinking about opening in a practice in like fill in the blank city, and it's going to be start up from scratch, fee for service, and I'm going to go into all this debt, and I'm going to need X amount of new patients to cover my expenses. And we look into it and find that it's oversaturated with dentists, and the dentist to patient ratio is not looking promising given the scenario that their perfect scenario. Is that also a client that your firm would work with to say, maybe a different city if you want to, if
Right.
this is your ideal
Right.
environment. Like where are there are places that you'd love to live, because we don't
Mm,
think it's in our experience, you're not going to be successful in the model that you're suggesting
Yeah.
in this area.
Yeah. Well, let's say you
Well, and that's
find
where I would oftentimes suggest that they buy another practice instead of doing a startup. Startups are extremely difficult right now. I would say our most successful startups are in pediatric practices.
Okay.
So those are still very successful. But again, you've got to double check for saturation. So I
Yes.
always recommend doing a demographic study of the area and really making sure that not only are there physical people there, but they also value dentistry and they're going to spend money on dentistry.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I would encourage them to look for an existing practice. The other thing that I would encourage too is to consider a partnership. We're seeing more and more partnerships than we ever have before. And while in a sense, it's difficult because you're kind of bringing in the competition with you, if you're both, let's say, general dentists offering the same set of services. But if it's possible that one of you can specialize in other procedures that you're referring out right now, then that can be a great fit for the practice. You know, I have more general dentists now learning how to do implants, sleep apnea treatment. So there are ways to bring other services into the practice. And if you can find an existing practice where they are referring out a lot, they might not have thought about bringing in a partner, but if you could show them that you'll bring additional revenue with you and help be able to build the practice larger, then that could be another great opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah. What are some other things that dentists should look for, like a solid brand, or what other things help make a transition maybe a little easier or attractive?
Yeah. Some of the things really don't have as much to do with the numbers on the surface of it. So oftentimes what I suggest they look for is someone who wants more time and less money. So we're looking for a senior doctor who is just tired of working and can afford to not work as hard. So you really have to find a doctor who can walk away. Now it's okay if they're going to be working 1 or 2 days a week for a few months, maybe even up to a year, but the practice has to be large enough to support that. So typically what that's going to mean is that you're going to need a practice that's probably at least 1.2, 1.4 million in revenue if you're going to have a second doctor working very much at all. Yeah, there are so many times that we've got a doctor trying to sell an $800,000 practice, and then they're saying that they still need to work 3 days a week. Well, that's not going to work.
Right,
There's
right.
not enough production there to be able to support both doctors. So you're really looking for a doctor who doesn't have to work anymore, but will choose to support you for a brief period of time. And then you're looking for a practice that has enough potential revenue to support all of the goals that you have. You know, make sure that's the right size team that you want. Decide whether or not you work better by yourself or in a partnership. You know, some key things to know about your own personality and the way that you like to work. And then you're looking also to make sure that it's the right type of dentistry. If you want to be doing a lot of cosmetic dentistry, then you need to make sure that's the makeup of that patient base, for example. And, you know, make sure you can replicate the dentistry that's being done by the senior doctor. If the senior doctor is doing a lot of specialized treatment that you don't have the education yet to be able to do, then that's a problem because we're going to have to plan on you not being able to collect that revenue anymore. In some parts of the country, too, we have to really take into account the effect of insurance, particularly with Delta Dental. If it's a premier practice, but now you're not going to be a premier provider, well, that's a discount on the revenue. So we've got to make sure that you can still afford the practice at the price they're going to sell it for when you're going to have reduced collections.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and if
So those are some of the things that I look at.
yeah. Well, if you want like a different type of practice, like if you have a highly restorative practice who the doctor is ready to, you know, to retire and not practice, and you want to come on board and you now want families and kids and bread and butter stuff,
Yeah.
like that's also something you're going to have to consider. It's not necessarily going to be an easy switch. You know, that practice, that office has a reputation in the community, especially if that doctor has been there for a long time. So it's never really a simple process by any means.
Yeah. And you can definitely add on insurance options if you want to. So it is possible to plan that out where one doctor is going to be in network, the other doctor isn't. So that can be a way to bring in some higher volume and also a different type of patient as well.
Just to bring it back around to, I know we started the conversation today talking about taxes, and is the season
Yes, everybody's favorite thing.
It is.
It's time to settle up with Uncle Sam. When it relates to marketing and expenses for a practice, how do you relate that back to preparing for taxes?
Well, one of the things that I really remind my clients of is that if you're spending money on something such as marketing, that's tax deductible. So that alone is helping you save more taxes, and it's making the project more affordable, and that creates a higher rate of return. So for instance, one way to look at it is if you're going to be spending $10,000 on marketing, well, you're going to, in essence, be getting a 30 to 40% discount off of that. So that might get it down to, 7,000 or something in that range, depending on what tax bracket you're in and whether or not you have state taxes as well. But that means it's going to be less expensive than it seems like it would be on the surface of it. And, especially this time of the year, as people are starting to think about their tax returns and getting everything filled out, it's important to know that you can still change last year's numbers in a lot of ways. There are some things that we can't change, like W-2s, those are now frozen in time, but other expenses can be changed. And this is where, a lot of CPAs work with such a wide variety of businesses that they don't really know what can be deducted by a dental practice and how aggressive they can get on some of the deductions. So we actually have a lot of dentists who hire us at this time of the year to review what just happened for last year, be as aggressive as we can on the tax deductions, so that then when this tax return gets filled out, they're able to save more in taxes. And that's creating more cash then to be able to invest in the marketing for this year or other equipment that they know that they need, or other upgrades in the office.
Fantastic. Sorry.
It's okay. You're all right.
Okay. So some of the areas that they can deduct for, taxes are such a foreign thing to me. I don't even do them in my own house. That's pushed off to my husband's responsibilities. I make him do it. Numbers are his life. But what are some of the areas that dental practices may not realize that they could be deducting for their tax purposes?
Well, with the newer tax law change that we had, what has happened there is it has really changed the way you deduct meals and entertainment and holiday meals for your team members. It used to be that you were able to deduct all of the money that was spent on any food you brought in for the team and for any lunches, if you guys went out to lunch or something. That has now changed where it's only 50% deductible, just as it has been for the doctors. Theirs has only been 50% deductible. But I believe there's a loophole you can use by calling these holiday meals where you get a full tax deduction. But that means those need to be broken out into a dental specific category on your financial statements so that when it goes on the tax return, you're using 100% deductible item there. So, the idea is that if you're celebrating any type of holiday, you're recording that note with that expense and the check you just wrote or the credit card charge so that you now get the full deduction for that.
Gotcha.
I really believe it's important to have dental specific financial statements. Most doctors who call me have just a very standard set of financials that's usually alphabetical. And I usually cannot look at that and tell exactly what their overhead is because they've combined doctor expenses in there. Usually they've lumped together doctor wages with the rest of the staff in just one or two categories. I can't even tell what the hygiene overhead is. So every dentist should have a dental specific set of financial statements where they can look and within 30 seconds, they can find their true overhead percentage before doctor expenses. And they can look at key categories of staff overhead, for example, their supply cost overhead. So I think that's going to make it important for them as they're doing planning to then look at where can they be more aggressive on their deductions. I mean, some of the other deductions that we take are things like reimbursing the doctor to use their home office or to even use their home for business events. A lot of times they've got consultants that will come stay with them while they're consulting in the practice. or they might have team huddle meetings there or holiday parties. All of those things we can reimburse the doctor for basically renting the house as long as it's for less than 14 days a year. Then the doctor does not have to record that as rental income on their personal return.
Okay.
So that can be an excellent tax deduction to use. Very frequently, I find that we can pay the kids through the practice or even the grandkids through the practice. And one of the ideas there is that we're shifting the income out of the doctor's tax bracket into the kids or grandkids' tax bracket, which is usually zero or slightly higher than that, depending on their situation. But, for 2019, you were able to pay up to $12,000 per child, and they would not owe any taxes on the first $12,000 of revenue. So that can easily create $3,000 or so in tax savings, real cash for the doctor.
Wow.
And that adds up pretty quick when you have multiple children.
Certainly.
Kate, your brain has to be full of so much stuff, like so many rules and loopholes, and it's not like it's not like a Dewey Decimal System where you pull the drawer out and it never changes.
Right.
Like tax laws change all the time. Like your brain
They
has to
do.
be, oh my gosh, so full of stuff.
Well, that's what we love doing, is keeping up with all of the latest legislation and changes. And, a lot of people don't realize that the IRS doesn't even give us some authority statements on how these are going to be audited, some of these new rules. And they also don't even release tax forms yet. So everybody's kind of getting geared up just like we are, where we send out our tax organizers and we're gathering documents from clients. But usually it's not even until February that the IRS has given us some more guidance on some of these issues, and then actually release the forms to say, okay, now we're officially accepting tax returns.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, this is why I value someone like yourself so much, because I know, like, I'm fortunate in my household, I have somebody that's their passion. They're going to rock it out. But so many other people don't. And if it was just up to me, I'd be hiring somebody like yourself. Because you know everything. You are staying up to date on where I can deduct every last cent. Yeah. And that would be important to me as a business owner. It's not something like dentists specifically are already doing so much continued education to keep up on the procedures and services they're offering. I'm sure the last thing that they have time for is to figure out what the new tax laws are and how they affects them or their employees.
Because they could certainly understand it, but usually they just don't have the time. And, again, it's all about being proactive and really planning ahead, so most of my clients have known since last summer what I think they're going to owe in taxes right now as we fill out this return. And that's key, because it helped so many clients be able to make final spending decisions in December. So we would decide then, do you need that extra piece of equipment? Mm-hmm. If you do, when do we need to squeeze that in as a deduction? Or is it possible that you could wait and, save that cash? So I think it's key just to, again, try to prevent the tax surprises. I really think a lot of dentists don't realize that you don't have to have a surprise.
Sure.
But you've got to hire someone who's really good at running those calculations and the projections. And then, of course, be willing to invest in that type of advice, because if you're just filling out an annual tax return, that's a whole different level of service than, my firm, where we have boutique services where we're meeting with them, every month or every quarter, and then doing all the active planning.
Right. Like, again, being deliberate with the planning, being deliberate with what you want, not just come April and let's fill out a bunch of numbers on a sheet and mail it in and hope for the best.
That's right. At that point, it's a little too late. It just is what it is.
I think aside from like our conversation on our last episode with David and embezzling, like to me that seems terrifying as a business owner. But I think then owing Uncle Sam more money than I had planned to would be like the second most terrifying.
Yeah. Well, I'm reminded of this is a little bit, I guess, millennial humor, I guess. But I found a meme the other day, which basically says something along the lines of, you're going to have to, the government says, well, you have to pay us money. And they're like, okay, well, how much do I have to pay you? Well, you have to figure that out. Like, well, what if I get it wrong? Well, then you go to prison. And you're like, but you know how much I owe you. So why can't you just tell me? So it's not that easy, guys. Somebody like Kate can help you figure that out.
For sure. Well, and I do tell doctors the main key to not getting put in jail is to make sure you're always reporting the money coming in. So it's just always key to report all of the cash coming in. And to your point about embezzlement, I find that if you have created a culture in your office where they know that you don't always deposit the cash that's received, let's say maybe on a weekend emergency visit or whatever, then you've now set the tone of an acceptable culture where you don't have to report all the money. And then someone at the front desk then has maybe more of an excuse or feeling that it's okay to embezzle. So I think it's important to always track all of the money coming in. We can get really creative on expenses, but just to make sure you're always reporting the money coming in is the first key step. And then, if you get audited over the expenses, at least we have reasonable talking points for it, and we can always negotiate, what percentage of something should have been deductible. But I think that is really going to help protect most dentists if they think of it that way.
Right. And probably most importantly, if you're looking for creative ways for deductions, call Kate. Don't create your own adventure.
Don't create your own adventure.
Because this is not a create your own adventure novel. Call Kate and she'll give you pointers and walk you through it. That way you have a CPA to back you up. So that if Uncle Sam's people do call you, you have a reliable source that's going to be able to back you up. Like you said, negotiate if necessary. If you did this all on your own and kind of made it up as you went along, that's probably where you're going to look at some hot water.
Yeah, that's terrifying to me.
Terrifying. That's right. Well, I look forward to working with dentists who are truly entrepreneurial, where they really want to grow their businesses. They want proactive advice. They're tired of being reactionary, and that they really want to also look out for their teams and build the right profitability to be able to pay their teams well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, that's worth saying is these things work if you work it. You have to have the right mindset to make these programs work for you. Like Kate's programs to help you get to your future that you want, you have to work it. It doesn't just happen magically.
And like you said, this is probably your busiest time of year because it is tax season, and now people are reaching out because they need help, or it's a new year, new me. I'm going to get my finances in order along with their health and everything else. What is the best way for somebody that has not talked to you before to reach out to you to secure some time on your calendar?
Well, they can definitely go to our website. It's thewillefordgroup.com, and the shortened version of that is twgcpas.com, so plural CPAs. Okay. And also our phone number is 770-552-8500. And they can also email me at info@twgcpas.com.
Fantastic.
Perfect. And I do think you have some upcoming events, right? You just got back from SEN Unplugged in Napa, and you will be teaching a dental business course to orthodontic residents at UNLV February 28th, right?
That's right. Yes. So I'll be teaching one of my courses then. And then we have our ADCPA meeting coming up. And our national group of Academy of Dental CPAs is a phenomenal resource for any dentist as well. Many of us have clients all over the country, and I think reaching out to us at our website would also be another great way to find a dental CPA who's close to you if you would like someone that's right out your back door. And that's adcpa.org.
That's perfect.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure all of the links and resources are in the description of this podcast as well. Okay. So people could easily click. They don't have to try to be jotting all this down.
Yeah, we'll include links to all of these resources that Kate has mentioned. And Kate, just a kind of a side personal note, I want to thank you for being willing to go into these dental schools and teaching these, I'm going to say kids, but that's probably not the right term, but teaching these students kind of the ins and outs of the business as best as you can with, the limited amount of time that you're given to teach them, because it's absolutely a missing piece to their curriculum. So thank you for taking a step to try to fix that. It's only, can only help, and it can only help people make smarter, wiser business decisions in the future.
Well, you're welcome. And it's a way for me to give back to the community that has been so good to us and our family business over all these years. And to really encourage the entrepreneurial spirit in America, I think is key. So I really enjoy teaching the classes, and usually they bring me in as part of the practice management course. So it's exciting to just be able to be there and to talk about not only business numbers, but also personal finance, and really help doctors know how to now handle the real world when they get out of school and handle their money.
Oh, yeah, especially, I mean, a lot of them are leaving with quite a chunk of debt. So I'm sure they're super appreciative on, what do I do now?
Right. It's like the now what? Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
now
here.
what? There's a did it, now what? So, well, Kate, is there anything else that you wanted to share or talk about today, or anything that's really kind of near and dear to your heart that you want to make sure gets said?
Well, the other thing that's really important to me that we touched on towards the beginning is transitions.
Okay.
So I would just, recommend that any doctor who's thinking about buying a practice, they should reach out to a dental CPA, a dental attorney, and just make sure they've got independent representation, that they really are buying the right practice for them that will cash flow. I think that's something that is missing in a lot of the transitions that I hear about. So I definitely recommend that you find someone who can help you with that. And I just appreciate y'all's time today. Thank you for having me on with you. And I'm excited about all the marketing that you guys do for my clients. I see such great results when you're helping my clients with their marketing programs. So thank you for everything that you guys do.
Yes, thank you. And
Kate.
ditto to that. Because sometimes we get the transitions, hey, I just bought a practice. And you're like, oh, okay. Let's figure this out. Let's do it. But they don't have a lot of the background that they should, in an ideal world. So yeah, ditto on that.
Exactly.
So, all right, Kate. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I know that Golden Proportions CEO Zani is going to be joining you on your podcast soon too. So you'll get to flip the script on her. So we're excited to see that
I'm
as
looking
well.
forward to it.
Oh, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.